Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Papa Boris, and in this video I'm going to undertake my most ambitious explanatory video in the history of my channel. I'm going to teach you how to play the board game Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. This is a high complexity strategy board game with a civilization theme. It's extremely highly ranked on BoardGameGeek.com, and in my opinion, it is the best civilization themed game of any kind, board game or video game, ever made. So I'm very excited to teach it to you. Now this is a video where I teach you how to play the game, but just a quick mention of the app. I am using the official Through the Ages app on Steam to do this video, and again, the point of this video is not necessarily to review the app, but it is a phenomenal app. It is basically the best board game digital adaptation ever made by a head and a shoulder compared to any other one that's ever been made, in my opinion. So this is one of the rare times that even if you don't get the physical game, you can consider getting the digital game. The single player content is phenomenal. The multiplayer is phenomenal. So it's one of the very few, possibly only board games that I think it's actually worth it to buy the digital version, even if you're not already, even if you don't already have a pre-existing love through playing the physical version. Anyhoodle, let's go ahead and explain how the game works. I've got a pass and play 3-player setup here, and I'm going to be playing through some turns. I'm obviously not going to be playing with any kind of strategy whatsoever. My only goal is to just explain to you the mechanics of the game. And I'm going to start by explaining some general game concepts. Once you have that down, I think then it makes sense to start learning like the actual turn-by-turn rules. So, let's get into it. I think the genius of this game is the fact that it does not use a map. I've played a lot of different civilization-themed games, both in the board game form and video game form, and the map is where things always break down. Because when you have a map that you have to roam around on, it adds a lot of time to the game and a lot of complexity, and I find it doesn't really add very much to it. So but this game, by abstracting away the map, lets you focus on what's actually fun, which is like building things and researching things and in general developing your civilization. So your civilization is expressed, like your capabilities are expressed primarily by cards, and I'm not going to talk about them all now. Some of them don't appear at the beginning, but I'll talk about a few of the different card types now, and we'll get back to that topic when we get further into the game. So one of the different types of cards in the game are production technologies. You start the game with two: agriculture and bronze. Bronze is a mining technology, and agriculture is a food technology. These are the only production technologies that exist in the game. You can get higher versions of these, but you will only ever get food and mining production technologies. And the way that this game works is that technology cards in general do not indicate that you actually have anything, for the most part. There are some exceptions. What they indicate is the ability to make something. So just having the bronze technology like you do at the beginning of the game does not in itself mean that you have any bronze mines. What it represents is the ability to create bronze mines. Actually having a bronze mine is expressed by having a yellow worker token on the card. At the start of the game, you begin with 2 yellow worker tokens on the bronze card and 2 yellow worker tokens on the agriculture card. So what that means is that at the beginning of the game, you have 2 bronze mines and 2 agriculture farms. The way that resource production works in this game is, depending on your viewpoint, either very elegant or very fiddly. I have met players who feel it both ways. Personally, I think it's very elegant. In this game, all resources are represented by these blue tokens. Food and rocks are both represented the same way. The way it works is at the end of your turn, you simply place a blue token from your bank onto each production card, 1 for each yellow token that's on the card. So like at the end of the turn, you're going to get 2 blue tokens put on the agriculture card and 2 blue tokens put on the bronze card. The value of a blue token is different depending on what card it's sitting on. So a blue token sitting on the bronze card is equal to 1 rock, and a blue token sitting on the agriculture card is equal to 1 food. When you spend rocks or food, as the game goes on, you simply put them back into the blue token bank. Now, rocks are used to build pretty much everything. These production buildings, we'll talk about it in a moment, urban buildings, wonders, military units, pretty much everything is built with rocks. Food has one purpose only, pretty much, and that is expanding and upkeeping your civilization's worker pool. So the food is just for people, and then the rocks are kind of for everything else. Now, before we talk more about exactly how food works, let's discuss the blue token bank. So this indicates how many blue resources you can possibly hoard at any one time. If you actually run out of blue tokens, it means you simply don't make any more resources. That is pretty rare. What's much more likely, though, is that you become corrupt. So let's take a zoom in here. You can see here that this rightmost box has 6 blue tokens in it. Once all 6 tokens have been removed from this box, you uncover a -2 rock space. It's right here on the board. And what that means is that at the end of your turn, you actually lose 2 rocks before you gain your rocks from the mines that you have. So that would be like actually wiping out your entire production at the beginning of the game. What this basically does is I don't want to say punishes you, but it makes it difficult to hoard resources, because the more resources that you hoard on these production cards without spending them, the quicker that you open up these corruption spaces. And the corruption gets worse and worse. If you actually open up this entire middle box, you lose 4 rocks at the end of your turn. And if you empty out this bank, you actually lose 6 rocks at the beginning of at the end of the turn. So it's important to spend your resources so you are not corrupt. Or just, make enough rocks that you can deal with the corruption without caring. Or there are some, not many, but there are some ways during the game you can actually add more blue tokens to your bank, and those are valuable because they allow you to hoard more resources of either type without having to be corrupt. Now, for production of people, I want to talk about urban buildings first, and then we're going to return to how food works in raising your population. Urban buildings are gray. You start with 2 urban technologies, philosophy and religion, and just like the production technologies, these do not indicate that you actually have anything. Just having the philosophy card in front of you does not in itself mean you have a philosophy. Having religion in front of you does not in itself mean that you have a temple. What they represent is the ability to create labs and temples, respectively. Now, at the beginning of the game, you do start with a yellow worker on the philosophy card. You don't start with any workers on the religion card. So every player starts with 1 philosophy lab and no religion temples. At the bottom of each card, you are told what that card, or what each instance of that building does. So each philosophy lab that you have generates 1 science at the end of the turn. As you can imagine, science is what you use to learn new technologies, so it's a very, very good thing. Each temple that you build gives you 1 happy face and generates 1 culture at the end of the turn. Now, we'll talk about happy faces in just a moment, so hold that thought. Happy faces are like a static thing. You don't generate them, you just have them or you don't, and we'll talk about what they mean in a moment. Culture, with the harp symbol here, is basically this game's victory points. There are a scant few things that actually care about how much culture you have during the game, like whether you have the most or the least, but for the most part, culture is just victory points, and the object of the game is to have the most culture when the game ends. So this is a building that if you build it, gives you a happy face and also helps contribute to your ultimate goal, which is to score as many points as possible. Every urban building card has a cost. So you can see here in the bottom left-hand corner, philosophy says 3 with a rock symbol next to it. It means it costs 3 rocks in order to build a philosophy lab. Now, when you build one of these cards, in addition to spending the rocks, you also need to move a worker from your worker pool onto the card. So this worker, if you were to build a philosophy lab, would move from this worker pool to the card. And then you would be generating 2 science per turn instead of 1 science per turn, because you'd have 2 labs instead of 1. Now, the workers, once you spend your worker here, are a very important resource, because if you don't have any idle workers, you cannot build any urban buildings. So now let's go ahead and return our focus to food and how that works. If we open up our population bank here, this represents the untapped potential of your civilization to expand. In the beginning, it costs 2 food to raise your population. What that does is it moves a worker from the bank into your idle worker pool where it can be used. So workers in the idle worker pool, they can be used, to build new farms or build new mines or build new urban buildings, but workers in the bank cannot until you've paid the food to move them into your worker pool. But this worker pool is also subdivided into regions, kind of reminiscent of the regions that the blue token pool is subdivided into. And once you use up the 2 workers in this rightmost region, things get worse because your civilization is becoming more crowded. Now it costs 3 food to pull a worker from this pool into your worker bank, and you also have 1 upkeep. That means that at the end of your turn, you actually have to pay a food after generating food in order to maintain the workers that you already have. So in the beginning of the game, you just generate 2 food and that's it. But if you've taken out both of these workers, you generate 2 food and then you have to put back 1 to pay upkeep. And this gets worse and worse and worse as you go along. After you've cleared out your second bank, it now costs 4 food to raise your population from this third bank, and your upkeep is equal to 2, which wipes out your entire food production. So if you ever want to get workers from this bank and onwards, you have to improve your food making capabilities, or else you're never going to get there. But wait, there's more, because in addition, once your population gets bigger, not only do they get hungrier, but they also get more pissy and need entertainment. When you've cleared out all the workers from this bank, this happy face is uncovered, and one of your workers in the idle worker pool actually has to sit here. They are a discontent worker, and they don't want to work. If you can actually spend that worker to do something with it. But if you ever have an open happy face and there isn't a worker sitting on it, your civilization is in uprising. And apart from a few corner cases in the late game, you pretty much never ever want to be in uprising. With uprising, you make no resources, no science, no culture. Pretty much nothing that's supposed to happen at the end of your turn actually happens. So it's bad to be in uprising. So if you have this happy face open, one of your workers has to be tied up sitting on this happy face. Unless you have a happy face. Like if you, for example, have a worker on this religion card, this happy face will actually be colored in, so it's like you're cool. Your civilization is generating the amount of entertainment needed to make everybody happy without having you stick a worker on top of this happy face. As we'll see later on, there are also things that can happen, not necessarily, but there are events that can happen that punish you for having a lot of happy faces with workers sitting on them. These discontent workers can cause problems for you down the road, so finding some way to create happiness is probably a good thing over the course of the game. Okay, so that's the food bank, and now you know how the production technologies work and how urban buildings kind of sort of work, and in general how the blue bank and the yellow token bank work. I'm going to briefly mention two more types of technology cards, and then we're going to get to the actual game, turn-by-turn rules, which will necessitate also explaining some new mechanics. Of course, it is a really complicated game. If I forget anything or if there's something that's unclear, go ahead and ask. There's a good chance I'll forget something over the course of this video, so I'll just be monitoring the comments. Feel free to ask anything that's unclear or that you want to know more about. Okie dokie. So another type of technology is military technologies. You begin the game with an infantry technology of course, the crappiest type. Now, these work exactly the same way as the urban buildings and the production technologies. The card itself does not mean you have any warriors. It's more like the ability to create warriors. An actual warrior is represented by having a yellow token on the card, which you do get at the beginning of the game. You get 1. And so that's why there's actually like a 1 strength next to every player's profile picture, because everybody starts with 1 yellow token on the warrior card. They therefore have 1 warrior, and at the bottom of the card you see how much strength each unit of that type provides. It is 1. And the cost is like before. 2 rocks here is how much it costs to make a warrior. We'll talk more about military stuff later on. Suffice it to say that strength can be a very important part of the game. If you fall behind your opponents in strength, there's a really good chance that you are going to be screwed. It's not in the traditional way. There's no like going around attacking people necessarily, but you'll see that it does play a fairly important role. So this is just a quick introduction to how the strength works. And the other technology card I want to talk about is your government. Everybody starts with despotism. Every government card has several features. 1 is how many civil actions it provides your civilization. A second is how many military actions it provides your civilization. And the third in the bottom right-hand corner is this little weird house with a number inside of it. This is called your urban building limit. There do get to be some fancy governments later on down the road that may have like other effects as well. They can produce culture, give you strength, give you happy faces. They can do all kinds of weird things, but fundamentally these 3 things, the civil actions, military actions, and the urban building limit, are the most important parts of the card. So civil actions is basically how many actions you have per turn. Pretty much anything you can imagine doing costs a civil action during your turn. When you're out of civil actions, you cannot do any more stuff that turn. Military actions are used for building military units and disbanding military units. When we get to the military cards, which is, yes, there's a whole nother system in the game, get ready, those are played with military actions as well. So for the most part, you do everything with civil actions, but if you build or disband military units and do a couple of other niche things, you use military actions for those. Now, the urban building limit is very significant, and this is one of those things people can easily miss their first game, so it's very, very important. This tells you how many buildings of a particular type you're allowed to build. It applies only to urban buildings. So you can have as many mines as you want, as many farms as you want, as many military units as you want. But when it comes to these gray technologies, the urban buildings, you can only have a number of each type, as is indicated by the urban building limit in your government card. So at the beginning of the game, everybody can only have 2 urban buildings of each type. That means you can only have 2 labs. That's it. So you can only make 2 signs per turn unless you get some other things going on. You can only have 2 temples. If you get a new urban building technology, you can build 2 of that type as well. So it's not 2 urban buildings total, it's just 2 of each type. And that's why knowing the type of card is important. Like this is a lab, this is a temple, and so on. And as you get better governments, spoiler alert, every government besides despotism has more than 2, you can increase your urban building limit and have more buildings of the same type. Okay, so let's talk about the game. In the beginning of the game, you're going to deal out cards to fill this card row from the Age A deck. There are 4 ages. A for antiquities, then there's ages 1, 2, and 3. And then there's also Age 4, though there are no cards for Age 4. Age 4 is just a thing that happens, but there's no cards for it. Age A is a very short age. You don't stay in Age A for long. So most of the game that you are in Age 1, 2, and 3. This card row is a very important part of the game. We'll talk more about it when we get to Age 1. But for now, suffice it to say that cards are going to appear at the right-hand side, and they're going to move left, and they're going to fall off the left-hand side. And these cards are, well, there's a bunch of different types of cards. We'll talk about them in this very long explanatory video. But you pick up these cards from the row and you do things with them, and that's pretty much going to be like what determines the things your civilization can do. If you're not taking any cards, you can't really do much of anything. So in the beginning of the game, the first player gets 1 civil action's worth of cards. That means they can take a card from among these first 5. The second player gets 2 civil actions worth of cards. After the first player has made his choice, the second player gets to take 2 civil actions worth of cards. That means they can take 2 cards from this first 5, or 1 card from these middle 4. You can see cards in the middle area, they cost 2 civil actions to take. And then the third player gets 3 civil actions worth of cards. Obviously, if there was a 4th player, they would get, you guessed it, 4 civil actions worth of cards. So the third player can take 3 from the front, or 1 from the middle and 1 from the front, or they can just take 1 from this back end up here. And again, cards, as they move down, they cost fewer actions to take. So like, if let's say nobody takes this patriotism card in the opening draft, it's going to slide down and will be able to be picked up for just 1 civil action. So it's not like the Colossus costs 3 and the Hanging Gardens cost 1. The cost in civil actions to take a card is a function of where it's sitting in the card row. There's 5 1-pip spaces. There are 4 spaces that cost 2 pips or 2 civil actions, and there's 4 spaces that cost 3 civil actions. Cards always appear on the right, and they fall off the left. So just to illustrate how this draft can work, this is not like a strategy video or anything, this is just to show off different things. Let's say that I really want to grab this Wonder, the Hanging Gardens. So we'll talk about Wonders in just a moment. Wonders are kind of unique. Wonder is the only type of card in the game that does not go into your hand. Instead, if you take a Wonder, it goes immediately under construction and just kind of sits out in front of you. That's all I can do if I'm taking that Wonder. Well, that's actually, since I only get to take 1 card, that's just all I get to do, period, no matter what card I took. Red might be like, oh, that's interesting. Loading. I've never actually played Hot Seat. I didn't know there was like a loading component to it. Okay, cool. So red has 2 civil actions worth of cards. So red might be like, you know what? I will take Hammurabi and Engineering Genius. Hammurabi is a leader. We'll talk about them in a moment. And Engineering Genius is a yellow card. We'll talk about those in a moment as well. So then that's it. And notice red's going to now make 2 food and 2 rocks because they have 2 workers on their starting farm technology and 2 workers on their starting mine technology. Okay, green, I guess when you play Hot Seat, it shows you what everyone did, which is actually kind of annoying for the purposes of this video, but okay. So green now has 3 civil actions worth of cards. You can never take more than 1 leader of the same age. So leaders are very special because once you take a leader from a given age, like once you take an age A leader, you can never take another age A leader. So green doesn't really benefit much from taking these 2 cards because he can't. So he might be like, you know what, let me just put the pyramids under construction for 2, and I'm going to go ahead and grab Moses for my 3rd. Now what's going to happen here is after this draft phase is over, the proper game begins. And at the start of each turn, what you do is you clear out any cards in the spaces marked with an X. Just to clarify for completeness' sake, in the 3-player game, the first 2 spaces, the 2 leftmost spaces, always clear out, even if they're empty. So Homer's going to go away. He's not going to sit here. He's just going to be gone. This ensures that even if the players take no cards from the row, some progress is made towards the game's conclusion. In a 2-player game, the first 3 spaces are all cleared out. And in a 4-player game, only the leftmost space is cleared out. So the more players there are, the fewer cards are automatically forced off of the card row. And also, the more players there are, the more cards are in the deck to begin with. So this makes it kind of balanced no matter how many players you play with. The game always lasts roughly the same amount of turns. So now Homer's going to go away after green, makes his stuff, and then everything slides down, and see new cards come out from the deck. Okay, now the way it works is that I'm actually going to check to see in the settings if it's possible to increase the game speed. Let's see, opponents in live games, opponents in hot seat games, instant. How about instant? Yeah, that seems pretty good. Okay, let's see what that does for me. Okay, so in the first action phase of the first player's turn, you replace the empty spaces in the deck with Age A cards. That is the only time that you deal out Age A cards after the initial setup. From this point on, we're working with the Age 1 deck, so any cards that move down are replaced by cards from Age 1. So Age A really does not last very long. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the different cards that we've seen. We've seen yellow cards, green cards, and wonders. Those are the only types of cards that we see in Age A. As we progress into Age 1, we will see other types of cards. So leaders. A leader, like I said, is a very special card because when you take a leader, you are prohibited from ever again taking a leader from the same age. So if I take Julius Caesar, I am not going to be able to take, Alexander or Aristotle. My ability to take leaders is done for. Every leader has a special ability that goes into effect once you play that leader. So I could take, for example, Julius Caesar for an action, because taking a card from the card row costs a certain number of actions, depending on whether it's in the first 5, the middle 4, or the last 4. And you can see in the screen in this very well-designed app, you can see how many civil actions each card takes, depending on its location. And then I'm going to spend another one of my 4 civil actions to actually play him. So now I've got Julius Caesar. Now Julius Caesar's effect is he gives you 1 strength, he gives you an extra military action, and this is not going to make any sense right now, but you can perform 2 political actions during the politics phase, because yes, that's something that we need to talk about. There's a whole other game system we haven't even broached yet. Get ready, people, settle down for a wild ride. Okay, so that's 2 of my actions. I'm also going to build a mine. That will take my production up from 2 rocks per turn to 3, so I'm going to pay 2 rocks, because a mine costs 2 rocks. I'm going to move my worker onto the mine. So notice 2 blue tokens came off. I'll show that one more time. So 2 blue tokens come off, go back to your bank, and the yellow worker goes from the pool onto the bronze mine. So now I make 3 rocks per turn. And I'm going to pay 2 food, which is all my food, to get a new worker. This way, I now have a worker ready to go to, do things with in the future. That's all I got, so now I'm going to end the turn. And so what's going to happen is Alexander the Great's going to go away because he's in one of the first 2 spots, and everything is going to slide down 2 spaces. That will leave 2 openings up here, which will be replaced by the top 2 cards from the shuffled Age 1 deck. You have to go through the entire Age 1 deck to get to Age 2, then the entire Age 2 deck to go to Age 3, the entire Age 3 deck to get to Age 4, and everybody gets 1 or 2 turns in Age 4 as just kind of a wrap-up before the game ends. So you're going to see all the cards in the game, but because they're in a random order, it really dramatically, and because of course everybody has a different board state of this card row, everybody has to pay slightly different numbers of civil actions to get the cards that appear, because the cards appear and cost a lot, and they slide down and cost less. So there's a lot of variability and dynamism in the way the games play out, even though you're always seeing all the same cards. It's just, it's really quite an ingenious design. In addition, at the end of your turn, haven't talked about this yet, but at the end of your turn, you gain military cards. There's a whole deck of these wonderful, wonderful military cards. And you draw a number of them equal to your unspent military actions to a maximum of 3. So a big part of these rules will be me teaching you what the hell these military cards do. Let's hope Julius Caesar gets a nice spread. So we're making 2 food, 3 rocks now, drawn 3 cards. Good, got a little bit of variety there. And I guess we can continue on to red. It's Red's turn. Yay! Okay. Can it be instant, please? It's not as instant as I would have liked, but alright. So now we've got, what the? Oh, I see. It shows me everything, and then just kind of quick. Okay. Well, anyway, so it's Red's turn. We got a couple of cards coming up here. These are, notice, Age 1 cards instead of Age A. So, military cards. We'll talk about them, I guess, when Yellow's turn comes back around. Let's go ahead and chat about wonders. So a wonder, like we saw earlier, goes immediately under construction. It does not go into your hand. When you look at a wonder, you'll see a certain number of stages. The Colossus has 2 stages, because there's 2 numbers. Each stage costs a number of rocks equal to whatever number is shown in the middle. So for the Colossus, it costs 6 rocks total, broken up into 2 stages of 3 rocks each to build it. And if you successfully complete the wonder, then you get the benefits it says. Some wonders have benefits in the form of text. Like the Colossus draws you 3 military cards at the start of ages 2 and 3. Some wonders have effects at the bottom. So this Colossus Wonder gives you 2 strength, just a permanent bonus to your civilization, and 1 boat. That means colonizing. Yes, there's a whole nother thing we're going to have to talk about with the colonization of colonies. So anyway, the Colossus gives you those benefits. It costs a civil action to build a stage of a wonder, in addition, of course, to the rocks that you spend. On top of that, the blue token that you spend to build a stage goes onto the stage to indicate that you have built that stage, which is not just an elegant thing, it also means that there's a blue token that's not going back into your pool. So having wonders under construction slightly increases your chances for corruption, because those blue tokens that you're spending, one of them is sitting on the thing. This does mean that the number of stages a wonder costs is kind of part of its balancing factor. For example, the pyramids here, which are a very simple wonder, 3 stages. First stage is 3 rocks, second stage is 2 rocks, third stage is 1 rock. All they do is they just give you an extra civil action. And you can be like playing the game for the very first time in your life and probably understand that getting an extra civil action per turn is a pretty good thing. But that costs 3 stages to build, so you have to spend 3 civil actions building the pyramids, whereas this Colossus that red has will only take up 2 civil actions to build. So what I'm going to do with red is the same thing I did with yellow. We're going to build a mine. We're going to increase the population. I'm going to play my leader. Hammurabi's ability is that once per turn you can use a military action as a civil action. And normally I would at this point be done because I took a wonder, raised population, increased mine, played a leader. But as Hammurabi, I can actually play another civil action, spending a military action to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and grab a yellow card. So yellow cards, I'm not going to explain each and every one, but suffice it to say, the main thing about yellow cards is that you can just do what they say. It's like not necessarily something that we have to explain that much. And you cannot play a yellow card the turn you take it from the card row. So even if I had taken this as not my last action, I would not have been able to use it this turn. Yellow cards, if you've played Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, they have summoning sickness. It's kind of the thing. They need to wait a turn before they can go online. So I'm going to spend a military action to put this in my hand. We'll show it off next turn. And notice that Hammurabi has 1 military action left because he has Despotism, which is just 2 military actions, and then he spent 1 of them as a civil action. So when I end the turn, I'm only going to draw 1 military action, which, is a cost to Hammurabi's ability. Okay, let's continue. Let's move on down to Funky Town. Okay, so with green, I don't think I'm going to do anything super crazy. We'll just play the leader. Moses' ability is that it costs him 1 less food to raise his population. So I'm going to play Moses. And I can actually raise my workers twice. Once, twice, because it only costs 1 thanks to Moses. And now we can see the happiness mechanic at play here. I've revealed my first happy face. So one of my workers, which is supposed to be sitting in the worker pool, is actually sitting on that happy face. So this worker can't really be used. I mean, I am allowed to use him, but if he does not generate a happy face, and this is just left as an empty open happy face, then I'm going to be an uprising, and uprising is bad. Well, I'm not worried about that for now. We're just going to go ahead and make our 3rd mine and end the turn. Notice also that Moses made the green player here, made only 1 food. That's because he makes 2 food, but then he has to spend 1 food because he revealed this upkeep spot. So you can see that the issues with population growth happen pretty much right away. Okay, it's now time to talk about the military action deck. And if you're hoping that this would be a pretty quick part of the rules, I am sorry to disappoint you. It's going to take a while because this is a pretty complicated game. There are a bunch of different military cards. So let's talk about each one. There are events, which are green. There are defense/colonization cards. There are tactics cards. There are aggression cards. There are pacts. And then in ages 2 and 3, because there aren't enough things, obviously, in age 1, there are also war cards. And age 3 has these green cards, but they work a little bit differently, so we'll have to explain those separately. So yeah, playing an event. Most of the cards, or at least a lot of them, are these green cards. And in the beginning of your turn, you have what's called the politics phase. During the politics phase, you may perform a political action. This can be either to offer somebody a pact, or to play one of these event cards, or if you have an aggression card, like we can't see it because it's past in play, but if you have an aggression card like one of these, you may aggress upon somebody. And we'll talk about all these different things. So playing an event means you put it into the future events pile. At the beginning of the game, there are 10 cards in age A, and they are just shuffled, and you deal out a number equal to the number of players plus 2. So in a 2-player game, 4, and a 4-player game, 6, and in a 3-player game, it's 5. So this is like the starting deck. These are all good things. You get some kind of a, just a bonus. You can look at, you can just kind of scan and see like a bunch of different things. So you can gain food or rocks, military cards, build a free thing, raise your population, just all kinds of good stuff can happen from AJ. So when you play an event into the future pile, you reveal an event from the current pile. When the current pile is depleted, all the events in the future pile get shuffled up and put into the current pile. The only way the shuffling is manipulated is that event cards from earlier ages must happen before event cards from later ages. It is possible and even likely that at some point there will be both, like, for example, Age 2 cards and Age 1 cards in the pile. You shuffle it so that the Age 2s all go on the bottom, and then the Age 1s go on top, so you can never have an event from a later age taking place before an event from an earlier age. So if I play this 4A, for example, each of the 2 strongest civilizations gains a total of 3 rocks and or food, I am going to flip up one of the cards from the current stack, and that'll affect everybody. Now, when you play an event, you also score points equal to the age it's from. So Age 1 events give you 1 point, Age 2 events give you 2, Age 3 events give you 3 points when you play them. So let's go ahead and play it. So in it goes, and we got Development of Agriculture. Everybody gets 2 food. Yay! Okay. Now, Julius Caesar's special ability is he can actually play 2 political actions. So let's go ahead. This is not a good play, but let's just go ahead and illustrate how pacts work. When you play a pact, you offer it to one of the other players. This pact is symmetrical. It gives both players 1 extra military action, and it gives both of them plus 2 strength if one attacks the other. There are some pacts that are asymmetrical. For example, the other Age 1 pact, Trade Routes Agreement, I cannot zoom in on it. Interesting. Makes it so that one of the 2 people in the pact can use a food as a rock, while the other person in the pact can use a rock as a food. And the person offering the pact chooses which civilization they are, A or B, and which civilization the person they're offering the pact to is. According to the rules, if I remember correctly, this might not be the case because this is from the original game, and this game has been like a little. There's like a newer this is like the newer version of the game that came out many, many years ago. It said that you're not allowed to like talk to people before offering the pact. That's how I've always played it. I'm not sure if that's still in the rules, but the way it was originally written is that you just cannot talk to somebody. So like you can't be like, hey, if I offered trade routes, would anybody be up for it? Like blah, blah. You just have to like straight up stone cold offer it, say who's civilization A, who's civilization B, and then again without any more talking, the person who's been offered the pact has to decide if they accept or not. Whether they accept or not, that's your political action. So if you offer them a pact and they reject it, then that's it. You just wasted your political action. So Caesar might be like, hey, Red, you want to get an extra military action? And if one of us attacks the other, then the attacker gets plus 2 strength. So it jumps to Red's turn, amusingly. Okay, so Red, I guess, is going to see all this stuff happening. He's going to see the event. You're like, oh, yeah, we got 2 food, woo. And then he's going to reject or accept it. So let's say he accepts it. He's like, all right, it's fine by me. Let's go ahead and go for it. I could use an extra military action because I'm Hammurabi, and I, use military actions as civil actions. So pact accepted, and we're back to Boris Dina's turn. Now, Caesar at this point has 4 military actions. But remember, you only get up to 3 event cards or political cards at the end of your turn, even if you have more than 3 unspent military actions. In addition, the way that pacts work is that basically you can only have 1 pact with a given player that was initiated by you. So Caesar can now initiate a pact to Moses, but he cannot initiate another pact to Hammurabi because he already has one that he initiated. Now Hammurabi actually could initiate a pact to Caesar, because even though he has a pact with Caesar, he did not initiate it, so he could offer one back. So it's possible to have 2 pacts with the same person, as long as one of you initiated one and the other one of you initiated the other. So that's how pacts and events work. We'll talk a little bit about aggressions and stuff later on. I'm hoping Caesar's actually going to draw an aggression, because he's the person I'd like to use it with. So let's go ahead and say that Caesar now during his turn wants to increase his population, so he's also going to open up this spot. And let's say that he decides to take a militaristic bent to things. He'll spend a military action and 2 rocks to build another warrior. And now he's got 3 actions burning a hole in his pocket, so he's thinking, okay, let's grab Monarchy for 2 civil actions. What Monarchy does is it upgrades your government. It's an orange card, which is a government technology. Monarchy, you can see, is better than despotism quite substantially because it offers you an extra civil action compared to despotism, 5 instead of 4, 3 military actions instead of 2, and the urban building limit is now 3, so you can now build 3 urban buildings of the same type as opposed to just 2 of them. So that's cool. There are 2 ways to get in place a government. One way is to pay the upper cost in science, which is 8 for monarchy. That's a lot, as you can see. Caesar's got 2 and he only makes 1 per turn. The other way is to pay just the lower cost. That's called getting the government by revolution. When you get a government by revolution, you essentially lose all your civil actions for the turn, including any gained from the upgrade. from the upgrade to the government. So it takes up your whole turn, but it lets you save a bunch of science. So Caesar's maybe thinking about doing that next turn. We'll show that off that mechanic. In addition, Caesar will grab here an urban growth, which lets you build an urban building, or upgrade 1, and pay 1 less rock for the privilege. Alright, let's go ahead and end Caesar's turn. See if he gets any aggression cards. Come on. Yeah, alright, good times, good times. It's gonna be spicy. Alright, so Hammurabi's up. Let's go ahead and talk about some new mechanics. Hammurabi is going to skip politics because he's not going to be able to aggress on anybody. We'll talk about that later on. Hammurabi now wants to build another lab to make more science per turn. He's going to play the urban growth action to do that. It lets you build or upgrade an urban building, paying 1 rock less. Normally, a lab would cost 3 rocks, but if I play this card, it costs only 2 rocks. So now he's got an extra lab, and he's making 2 science per turn. He's also going to play this engineering genius, which makes you Stage of Your Wonder, paying 2 fewer rocks for the privilege. Each stage of this Colossus costs 3 rocks, and Hammurabi's only got 1, but by playing this engineering genius, he can only pay just that 1 rock to build that 3 rock Stage of the Wonder. So he's halfway there to getting this Colossus and getting all caught up on strength with Caesar. In addition, Hammurabi's going to raise his population and grab a printing press. This is a new type of urban building. It is a library. So there are 5 different types of urban buildings. There are labs, temples, libraries, which make culture and science, theaters, which make a happy face and an increasing amount of culture. And then there's also one more I'll just show you here. There's also arenas. Arenas make multiple happy faces and a little bit of strength. Okay. Hammurabi can actually play 1 more action because he can use a military action as a civil action. So he's going to go ahead and grab the stockpile, which can be played just to simply gain a rock and a food. And that's his turn. Okay, Hammurabi's just raking in these aggression cards. So you might be thinking, well, I got a bunch of aggression cards, so I bet Caesar doesn't have any, so I should be totally safe without having to upgrade my military capabilities. There's an accepted pact, yep, all the stuff that we just saw. Yep. Okay. So, let's talk about some new types of cards. First of all, this event says the weakest civilization loses 1 population. Moses is like, all right, I'm digging it. Let's just put it on in there. He gets a point. And we get 1 science, 1 food, 1 rock for everybody. Woo! Okay, so tactics cards. What a tactic card does is it lets you get essentially a bonus to your strength for having a certain composition of units. This is the simplest tactic card in the game. It's a fighting band. What it does is you get 1 strength for every 2 infantry that you have. There are also cavalry cards, which are these. In Age 1 there are knights. In Age 2 you start to see artillery cards, and in Age 3 you start to see air forces. So there's all in all 4 different types of military units. Tactics cards only apply to the infantry, cavalry, and artillery. They do not apply to the planes. Planes are special. We'll talk about them at the end. So here we got the simplest one, just to show it off. This is terrible gameplay, but just to show it off, Moses can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a warrior, and then play this tactics card. Playing a tactic card costs 1 military action. That would be both of his military actions for the turn, 1 to play the warrior, and then 1 to play the tactic card. And so now he has to actually play his turn. Let's go ahead and grab theology, just to illustrate that, hopefully, in the future. Let's go ahead and raise population 2 times. And for the last thing, he doesn't have a whole lot to do. I guess we'll just grab a frugality to show that off and pass the turn. Okay, so now let's talk about aggressions. I'm hoping that somebody draws a colony at some point. I might have to just explain colonies without actually showing you how it works, but we'll see. No one's drawn any colonies yet, so it would just be like a little bit of a time lapse if I were to actually show you how that works. Okay. All right, so let's talk about aggressions. The cost of an aggression is shown in the upper left corner of the card. It's how many military actions you have to spend to play the aggression. When you play an aggression against somebody, they have the ability to perhaps defend against it. If they defend against it, nothing happens. The person who played the aggression card is out some number of military actions and everything's cool. If they fail to defend against it, though, then the bad stuff happens. So if this raid goes through, then the person who was targeted by the raid loses one of their urban buildings. The worker is removed from the building and put back into the worker pool. And the person playing the aggression gains rocks equal to half the cost of the destroyed building, rounded up. So Caesar's going to be like, let's do it. He's going to play it against Hammurabi. Now, the thing is that we have this open borders thing, which is that when you go against somebody, you get a bonus to strength. Oh yes, so red gets to see all this stuff that happened. And then, congratulations, Caesar's going up against you. So Caesar's strength is 5. The reason it's 5 is because of this open borders agreement, which makes it so that if one person attacks the other, they get +2 strength. Now, the way it works is that when you defend, you can play a number of cards from your hand equal to the number of military actions that you have. So Hammurabi here has 3 open slots because he has 3 military actions. Each card that you play, regardless of what it is, gives you 1 to your strength. Now, the problem is, even if Hammurabi plays his whole hand, it's 1 shy of being able to defend against Mr. Caesar over here. There are defense cards. Defense cards give you bonus strength equal to the number shown. In Age 1, every defense card gives you 2 strength instead of 1. In Age 2, each defense card gives you a whopping 4 strength instead of 1. In Age 3, it goes all the way up to bonus 6 strength per defense card played. So there's a bit of RNG in this game that, sometimes having or not having a defense card at a critical time can make a difference. In addition, it's an indicator that, if you want to successfully pull off aggressions against people, you need to have an increasing amount of military strength as the game goes on to be absolutely sure of being able to pull the aggression through. So in this case, if Hammurabi actually had a defense card, he could play the defense card for 2 and 2 other cards for 1 each and cover the 4 strength necessary to block the aggression. But as it is, he has no choice but to concede. So now, Caesar's like, yeah, pushed it through, baby. And he will destroy one of Hammurabi's buildings. Hammurabi only has these labs, so he's going to destroy the lab. The worker does not go back to the bank. It goes back to the idle worker pool. So you can see the worker's now sitting here. And Caesar gained 2 rocks because a lab costs 3 rocks to build. And Caesar gained half of it, which is 1.5, rounded up, which is 2. So now Caesar has a bazillion rocks to work with. Also, being Caesar, he can play an additional card. So he's going to go ahead and play this border conflict. The weakest civilization destroys an urban building, farm, or mine. The strongest civilization gains 3 rocks. So when this comes up, some cards will mention the weakest civilization, some will mention the strongest. Ties are broken in player order. So if Caesar flips an event, he breaks all ties, then Hammurabi breaks ties, and Moses would lose all ties if Caesar is the one who's who's revealing the card. There do pretty frequently happen ties, so the knowledge of the rule for how ties are broken can be pretty important. So he gets a point, he plays an event, everybody gets 2 rocks or 2 food, and now look at this. So Caesar is just frickin' drowning. Why is it red's turn? That's weird. Caesar just did an aggression. Oh, I see. Everybody's choosing whether to gain the rock. This event comes with a choice, so everybody's choosing whether they get rocks or food. That kind of happens immediately. Okay, so we're just going to make some choices for everybody, and it's back to Borisina's turn. Okay, so now Caesar's swamped with resources, and he's thinking, well, I originally was planning to do a revolution to monarchy. But the problem is, if he does a revolution to monarchy, he's actually going to lose a whopping 4 rocks because he's lost so many blue tokens. So Caesar's like, crap. All right, I guess I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is try to spend off some of these rocks. Let's go ahead and raise population a couple of times. Let's build a new lab so my science production's not just totally embarrassing. And let's also grab a leader. Let's grab Genghis Khan. So now that he's got Genghis Khan, he cannot take any more Age 1 units. And we'll see what he does later on. For now, let's just go ahead and end Caesar's turn. Aha, there's a colony. That's perfect. So I'm gonna try to make sure to have this colony show up so I can explain to you the rules for colonization, which is one of the last things we have to wrap up in this game. Okay, so now it's Hammurabi's turn, and he's thinking, oh crap, things are getting pretty serious here with this military business. I was gonna make a printing press, but instead let's first start by finishing the Colossus. So now I've got that +2 strength and +1 to colonization. And now let's go ahead and grab some swordsmen. So the way that this is going to work is that after researching the swordsman, he now has the ability to either make warriors for 2 rocks and get 1 strength from each, or swordsmen for 3 rocks and get 2 strength from each. Hammurabi's going to build a swordsman here for all 3 of his remaining rocks. So now he's actually on top of the military pile. He's making sure Caesar does not screw with them anymore. In addition, he'll raise his population for 3 rocks and take this opportunity to just play a little stockpile, getting a food and a rock. And then he passes his turn. So he lost his lab, but he's thinking, never again. Always remember. All right, he got the other pact as well. Bet he won't be offering that one to Caesar. Okay. So now it's Moses' turn, and you saw this tactic card swoop in to the pool. So let's talk a little bit more about tactics. When you play a tactics card, it's yours for a turn. But once your next turn starts, that tactics card becomes public knowledge. Because, like, everybody saw you tromping around with a fighting band. They're like, oh, well, that's not so hard. I can just put 2 warriors together. Piece of cake. And so everybody can now use this fighting band. The catch is that in order to adopt a tactic from the pool, you actually have to spend 2 military actions for it rather than just 1. So there's an extra cost to not being the person who drew a particular tactics card. Okay, let's just show up some more mechanics here. Again, this is the gameplay here is just totally terrible. This is just, just to illustrate how things work. So, Moses wants some happy faces. So he is going to research theology. Now, theology is a temple technology, just like religion, so it goes on top of it. And so now he can actually upgrade a temple to a religion to a theology. Suppose Moses had a religion already. Notice now he has this happy face here, and he's making a culture per turn. That's because of the temple. And this worker, which was formerly unhappy and useless, now can be used to do things. To upgrade an urban building from a lower type to a higher type, you simply pay the difference in cost. A theology costs 5 rocks. A religion costs 3, so the cost to upgrade would be 2. And now Moses is actually making a whopping 2 happy faces. Good job, Moses. Of course, a smarter thing to do in that case is not to build a temple. Just go ahead and build straight to a theology. And you save a civil action in doing so. I'm also going to... Let me take a quick look at people's science. All right, well, we'll hold off on anything else for the blue stuff. I'm also going to grab... Moses is just totally out of science now. Okay, we'll just go ahead and grab some random stuff. And call it a day. So that's Moses' turn. Let's continue. And it's Caesar's time. So there's not many rules at this point that we haven't explained. One thing is colonies, and the other thing is I should really explain air forces and age 3 events, and that's most of the rules that you really have to know. So let's go ahead and put a colony in here, so that it can show up hopefully soon. Everybody gets a free warrior if they have a warrior available. Caesar will be like, sure, I'll take a free warrior, no problem. And then it becomes Hammurabi's choice to take a free warrior or not. And Hammurabi's like, I don't really want a 3rd one, so I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to pass on that gas. And then Moses is like, I don't really want to use a worker for a warrior, so good job, Caesar. That event was helpful for you, but not for anybody else, so I'm going to do nothing. Okay, so that event happened, and now Caesar is going to use a special ability to play another event. Caesar's like, well, I don't have that many workers, so I don't want to lose my population. I don't make any culture, so I don't want everybody to get culture equal to the culture, but I could use some science. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the scientific breakthrough. Notice that things can change. So right now, Caesar would make 2 science from this event, but if he gets a bunch more science production, he would make more. So the time lapse between you playing an event and the event triggering can sometimes cause some very interesting gameplay, because you really have to make sure that things stay good if you're going to play an event. All right, here's the last one. Everybody draws 3 military cards, yippity skippity. And the 5 cards that were here get shuffled and become the current deck. So now when people play events, instead of some starting cards being played, these cards that were put in are going to get played. Notice that this map is showing me 4 of the 5. That's because as Caesar, you can technically remember that you put these 4 cards in there. But this is not the order of the cards. The order they come out is random. Okay, so let's go ahead and show off some new mechanics. Genghis Khan is an Age 1 leader. When you play a leader, it costs a civil action, but you actually get your civil action back if you're playing the leader over an existing leader. So because the yellow player already has a leader in place, when he plays Genghis Khan, he's actually going to not lose any civil actions, because he spends 1 and then gets it back. If, however, the yellow player had no leader in play, which can sometimes happen if you just don't take a leader from a given age, or some leaders go away when you use their power, then that would actually have cost a civil action. Now, Genghis's ability is that 1 or more infantry units can be considered cavalry for the purposes of tactics. And he scores 3 culture if he's one of the 2 strongest civs. In a 2-player game, it's scoring 3 culture if you are the strongest civ, and you win ties. So now Caesar's going to play this heavy cavalry tactic. To get 4 massive strength from this tactic, you have to have 4 cavalry units. So right now that would mean having, sorry, not 4, 3. 3 cavalry units, that would mean having 3 knights, which is hard because knights cost 5 science, and it costs 3x to make a knight. That's kind of a big deal. But Genghis Khan lets you use infantry as knights, so he's actually going to get that bonus. He does, as you can see, get the 4 strength from the tactics card. Sorry, just making sure my baby's still sleeping. He does get the 4 strength from the heavy cavalry tactic because of his leader. So you can see leaders can be kind of a big deal. He has no aggressions to use at the moment, but his hoping is to high roll and get some aggressions to play on, you know, poor Moses or Hammurabi at some point here, because they're not going to know what hit him. In addition, I'm going to take a blue technology. We haven't talked about these yet. There are 4 different types of blue technologies in the game. There are navigation technologies, building technologies. We saw Moses pick up Code of Laws, civic technologies, and then the last type, which we don't see here, is military technologies. These are the only technologies in the game that do something without you having to put a worker on them, apart from the government technologies, which just establish your civil military actions, your urban building limit, and then some other benefits potentially. When you play one, you just get its effects. So the navigation technologies give you some strength and some colonizing, which we still have to talk about. The military technologies give you some number of military actions and some strength. The civic technologies give you civil actions. And the building technologies, let me zoom in on this a little bit. They make it so that urban buildings are cheaper, and you can build more than 1 stage of a wonder for a single civil action. So basically, every age has 1 or more of each of these technologies, depending on the number of players, and they get better as they go up in age. So for example, the first age navigation technology, cartography, is 1 strength and 2 navigation. If you get the age 2 version, which is called navigation, that's 2 strength and 3 colonizing power. And then the age 3 version, satellites, is a whopping 3 strength and 4 colonizing power. You cannot have 2 of the same type of blue technology in play at once. So if you already have cartography, and then you play over top of it satellites, the cartography goes away. So the bonuses do not stack. But if you have 2 different types, like if you have satellites and military theory, those bonuses do stack, and you can have them both at the same time because they are 2 different types of technologies. One's navigation, and then the other one is military. So now Julius Caesar is going to grab cartography and research it, getting 1 strength and 2 colonizing power. So now he's beating Hammurabi's bonus and is feeling pretty sweet about it. Did I call him Caesar? He's Genghis Khan now. He's also going to get started on this wonder. So he's going to build 2 stages of it, spending 4 rocks, because each stage costs 2 rocks. And he's only got 2 civil actions left. Notice he's going to be corrupt at the end of this turn because of the 2 blue tokens sitting on this wonder. You see, if they were sitting here, they would block up the space, but they're not. And Caesar's like, ah, screw it. Well, F it. Let's just move on. So he's going to face corruption. He's going to... Oh, ha! I totally did not talk about this rule. At the end of your turn, you have to discard military cards down to your number of military actions. It does not matter if they are spent or unspent. It's just the total number of military actions you have. You have to discard down at the end of your turn. So Genghis is like, well, I ain't never playing that or that. So let's move along. And notice Genghis will get 3 culture because he is one of the 2 strongest civilizations. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of a recap here. All that stuff happened that we just saw, and now Hammurabi's up. So at this point, there's not too much to do. I'm just going to try to flip a colony, basically, and hopefully discuss colonizing rules. All right, so Reign of Terror, weakest civilization loses a population. Green's the weakest, so he loses a population. Sucks to be you, Moses. And Hammurabi will just, do some random things. Let's go ahead and build a lab to get up our science production. Let's increase population. I'm going to pay this last rock to upgrade a warrior to a swordsman. Warriors cost 2 rocks, swordsman costs 3, so I'll spend a military action to upgrade, getting an extra strength. And I'm going to spend my last 2 military actions to steal this fighting band. Not steal, to also use the fighting band, getting an additional strength, because now I have this tactic for my 2 infantry units. So Hammurabi's actually not going to get to use a military action for a civil action this turn because he just spent his military actions doing military stuff. Hammurabi's thinking, all right, I want to get some friggin' science here, so let's take this breakthrough card, which gives back 2 science after developing a technology. And I'm also going to go ahead and grab me some bread and circuses so I can fix my happiness problem someday. It's an arena, the lowest level, costs 3 rocks, gives 1 strength and 2 happy faces. So that's Hammurabi's turn, and he has to discard down to 3. The defense card he's going to keep, and he's going to keep the some of these aggressions. Maybe he's thinking he'll use some aggressions against Moses. So let's just go ahead and get rid of all the cards down to 3, and that's his turn. I just gotta click the continue button. Okay, so I'm just trying to get that colony. I'll teach you the colonizing rules, and then I'm also going to explain air forces, and that's going to be pretty much everything. There's actually a couple of things about switching ages. Okay, so colonizing, switching ages, and air forces, and then we'll call it even. All right, so Moses does not have any interest in colonizing, but he has 2 happy faces, so he'll play this immigration thing. Civilizations with the most happy faces gain 1 population for free. Hopefully, he's hoping he's still going to have the most happy faces, or at least be tied for the most by the time this event is actually played. Foray. Okay, so yellow and red are the 2 strongest civilizations. They each get a total of 3 resources, broken up into rocks or food as they so choose. And this happens right now. So Mr. Genghis over here, he just lost a couple of rocks last turn. So he's going to want to gain some rocks now. Just get me 3 rocks, please. Thank you very much. All right, and then Hammurabi is going to see the exact same thing, and he's like, yeah, I could use some food to raise the population. Let me get 2 food and 1 rock. We'll call it good with that. Okay, so now it's Moses' turn, and so Moses is going to build a lab to get some more science. He'll play this reserves card, which allows him to gain 2 rocks or 2 food. He'd like to get some rocks now, but he can't. You have to wait a turn before using a yellow card. The frugality is from the previous turn, so he can play that now. It increases his population and then gives back 2 food. So he's going to spend 2 food because he's Moses to raise his population, then get the 2 food back, and then he's going to spend 2 more food to raise his population again. So Moses, you can see, is just flying through his yellow bank. He has to discard down to 2 cards, and he's like, well, I definitely don't want friggin' colonies, so let's go ahead and throw that crap away. And yeah, once we hit that colony, we'll explain colonization, age switches, and air forces, and that'll be the end of this incredibly long video, which is taking me about as long in video form as it does in real life, only I can actually use examples in video form, so it's probably better. Okay, so now it is Genghis Khan's turn, and he's going to play an event, because he really wants to hit that sweet, sweet colony that he put in there, and he knows it's coming. He's going to put another one in, actually. And there it is. Okay, colonies. So, when a colony shows up, everybody beginning with the person who just triggered the colony makes a bid of military strength to try to win the colony. Every subsequent player can either try to beat the previous bid or pass. You offer up your military units. If you offer at least one military unit, you may also offer defense cards, which, depending on the age, give increasing colonization bonuses. So a defense card can either be used for 2 strength or 1 colonization. Or an H2 card is +4 strength or +2 colonization, and then the H3 cards, defense cards, give you +3 to colonization. So right now, Genghis is making a bid of 4. 1, because he offered up 1 warrior. 2, because he played a colonization card, / defense card. And then the 4 is because he has this cartography technology. Cartography makes it so that you get a +2 bonus to your colonization. So that's where his 4 colonization bid is coming from. Now you have to bid at least a unit. So no matter what, you must always offer at least 1 military unit to colonize. If you do not have a unit, it does not matter how many other colonization bonuses you have, you cannot colonize. So Genghis is going to slow roll it. He's not going to offer that defense card. He'll be like, well, let me just put up 1 guy and my bonus from cartography and call it good. Quick note, if you throw an entire army in there, you actually get the tactics bonus. So if he throws in all 3 warriors, that's actually worth a whopping 7, because 3 for the warriors plus 4 since they form a heavy cavalry. Genghis is not going to go that crazy. He's just going to throw up 3. Then the turn passes to Hammurabi. And Hammurabi... Okay, that's good. Yep. Good. Yep. Cool. Yep. That's the one little thing about teaching this game. Okay. So Hammurabi sees that Genghis is offering up a bid of 3. Hammurabi's like, well, I can beat that. I'm going to throw up a swordsman. That's 2, because the swordsmen are worth 2, unlike Genghis's warriors, which are 1. Plus 1 for my colossus. That's 3, but you have to beat it. So, okay, let's throw in this defense card and 4. Booyah! Wouldn't want to do ya, Genghis. Okay, so then we see the whole thing. So Moses is like, oh, okay. Well, yeah. I could throw up 2 workers. Hello? You are unable to make a higher bid. Okay, yeah. Well, if he did, that'd be 1, 2, 3 for the army. And then 4, which would just tie the highest bid but would not pass it. So he's like, well, screw you guys. I didn't want to spend my warriors anyway because I'm already behind on strength. So he passes. Okay, so now it's back to Genghis Khan. It keeps going around and around and around until 1 person is left. So now Genghis is like, well, 4, I can beat that shit. Yeah, okay, so I'll put that in. Let me throw up both of my defense cards. Notice that you don't have to indicate what you are spending. You just say a number. The rule is that the number that you say has to be a number you can actually do. You cannot bid more than what you're capable of doing. The app just makes it very easy to, like, generate the bid. But if you want to, you can just, you know, twist the dial, and the game won't let you bid higher than what's capable. But here, just to illustrate what Genghis is thinking, he's thinking is I'm going to say 5, and then if I actually win, I'll spend 1 worker and 2 defense cards. Okay, so now Hammurabi's like, well, I'm not super surprised about the fact that Genghis is beating me. Can I go up to 6? You can go up to more than that. You can be like, F you, I'm going to go up to 7, if you think if the colony is actually worth it. Now, in this case, if Hammurabi were to spend both of his warriors, he would drop down to just 2 strength from the Colossus. And he's only got 3 rocks, so he'd be able to build 1 of them back and go up to 4, but that's still uncomfortably behind Genghis Khan, especially because of that open borders agreement. So Hammurabi's like, crap. I don't think I can afford to just throw my entire army at this. So I will let you have it, Genghis. I'm going to pass. Now, everybody's passed except for Genghis Khan, so Genghis wins the colony. If you win, you have to spend an amount of colonization power equal to whatever your bid was. And that can be generated, well, it must be generated by having at least 1 unit, plus if you have defense cards. So in this particular case, 1 for the warrior, 2 for having cartography, and then that's up to 3, and then 4, 5 for 2 defense cards. So there it is. Genghis got it. And now let's talk about the colonies themselves. So there are several different types of colonies. Vast colonies give you a lot of yellow tokens, a bunch of food, and you also lose a blue cube from your blue pool. So Genghis is completely out of blue resources because of everything crazy that's been going on. So I said that was unlikely, but here it is, it's happened. This makes it more likely that you'll get corrupt later on. There are other types of colonies. So there are the developed territories, which give you yellow tokens and blue tokens and a bit of science. Historic territories give you a bit of culture and a happy face. Strategic territories give you some military cards and a strength bonus, and then the inhabited territories give you some yellow tokens like the Vast, but instead of giving you food, they give you a bit fewer yellow, there is no penalty to your blue tokens, and you immediately raise your population. The wealthy territories give you a bunch of rocks and some blue tokens in your pool to help reduce the effects of corruption. The Age 2 versions of the colonies are just stronger versions of the Age 1. So like the Vast territory from Age 2 gives you 4 food instead of 3, and 4 yellow tokens instead of 3. In Age 3, there are no colonies. So it's just these types, 6 types in the base game, with stronger versions in Age 2. So now you can notice Genghis Khan's worker pool is like amazing. He's got 3 tokens in it from the Vast territory, plus the 1 token of the military unit that he sacrificed. The units that you colonize with go back into your pool. So he's like, okay, I still don't really have the room to do my monarchy business, but let's go ahead and finish off this wonder. That gives him back 2 rocks for the stage, plus the 2 blue tokens that are sitting on the wonder, so that already feels better. Then he's going to raise his population a couple of times, spending 2 food each time. So that feels much better. And now he'd love to build a 3rd lab, but he can't, because he's at his urban building limit. He will, however, spend 2 rocks and a military action to get another worker, bringing back his army strength. And now he's still just a smidge corrupt because of this territory cost him a blue token. So he's like, oh, crap! So he's like, well, you know what? I could make a temple, but F it. Let's just grab irrigation. I think that's valuable, so I'm going to take that and end my turn. Corrupt again. Okay, so that's the main rules in the game. I'm going to stop this explanatory playthrough here and just go over a couple of miscellaneous rules that you have to know as you play the game. First is when you hit the end of an age. If you, or when the last card is drawn from a deck. So this will happen at the end of Age 1, the end of Age 2, and at the end of Age 3. Then a few things happen. First of all, any cards that someone has in their hand, any leaders that the person has in play, and any wonders they have under construction are discarded if they are from 2 ages ago. So when we hit Age 2, if this Colossus were still under construction, it would be discarded, and Red would never have a chance to finish it because it's from Age A, and that is 2 ages ago from Age 2. Moses here better hurry the hell up and finish these pyramids, because if he doesn't finish them by the time this deck runs empty, when it hits 0 cards, they're going to be discarded and he's never going to get the bonus. In addition, everybody loses 2 yellow workers from their bank. So that is a further strain on your population. The further up in the age you go, the harder and harder it becomes to raise your population, because at the end of Age 2, you're going to lose another 2, and when you're in Age 4, granted, that's a very short age, you're going to lose another 2. So you're eventually going to lose 6 workers from your pool. So you really have to, up your food production to be able to make the magic happen. So that's, and then I don't think anyone has any cards. Notice everybody has used up their Age A cards, but if anyone has any civil action cards from Age A, they go away when you hit Age 2. And then similarly, when you hit Age 3, you do the same thing for Age 1 cards that are in your hand where wonders under construction, they go away. And when you hit Age 4, any Age 2 cards under construction or in your hand, or leaders that you have in play. So basically when Age 2 comes up, Genghis keeps on trucking because he's from Age 1, but Hammurabi and Moses, which are from 2 ages ago, will be discarded. So that's a bit of an incentive to replace your leaders instead of letting them die off. In addition, I want to talk about Air Forces. Air Forces are an Age 3 unit. They give 5 strength, just like all Age 3 units do. But in addition to that, they essentially double the tactics value of one of your tactics cards. So basically, if Genghis Khan had an Air Force, it would be worth 9 strength. 5 inherently from the Air Force, plus another 4 because he has a heavy cavalry tactic. If you've assembled multiple armies, each Air Force, you can basically have 1 Air Force per army to double its strength. So if Genghis had 6 warriors and thus 2 heavy cavalries and an Air Force, he could actually make 2 Air Forces, each of which would give him an extra 4. But if you only have 1 army, the first airplane you make gives you a doubling of your tactics value. The second airplane does not. When you hit Age 4, if player 1's turn is the turn during which Age 4 is reached, then everybody, including player 1, gets 1 more turn, and that's that. So that's basically, if player 1 hits Age 4, like when the card row is being refilled, then that's player 1's last turn. Then player 2 gets a turn, and player 3 gets a turn, and the game is over. If anybody besides player 1 triggers age 4, because the last card from age 3 is dealt onto the card row, then that is not their last turn. They play, and then the players after them play if there are any. And when player 1 gets his turn at the beginning of the next round, that's going to be the last round. So that is a slight compensation for being later in the turn order. You can potentially get like more time in age 4 to do things than the first player. Whereas if you are the first player and age 4 hits, then that's like immediately your last turn and there's nothing you can do about it. Then there are age 3 event scoring cards. So the events in age 3 are a bit different. Instead of doing like miscellaneous things like so-and-so gains 3 rocks and so-and-so has to fart in someone's face or whatever, all of these event cards give points for various things. Like impact of population. Everybody scores 2 culture for every content worker above 10. Now, if these should happen to come up during the game, as they often will, then they just happen as normally. The only thing that's different about these event cards is that at the very end of the game, if there are any still sitting in the deck, they are all revealed and they are all scored. So when you play one of these, you know it's going to happen either during the game or after the game is over. That is not the case for other cards. There are some age 2 cards, for example, that do scoring. So for example, popularization of science from age 2. Everybody scores culture equal to its science rating. If this is still in the deck at the end of the game, it does not happen. This has to happen during the game for you to get your massive culture boost if you have a giant science rating. But the age 3 events do happen no matter what. So you can count on that as you're going in. And lastly, I just realized tactics. So in age 1, this isn't an issue. But starting with age 2, there's a concept of antiquated tactics. Take a look, for example, at this defensive army. You'll notice that unlike the age 1 tactics card, it actually has 2 tactics values. See that? Like in age 1, everything just has a single value. Like if you do this, you get that many bonus strength. But in age 2 and age 3, there's 2 values. The lower value is what you get if your army is obsolete. So in other words, if you have 1 or more units in this army that are from 2 ages ago, then the army is considered obsolete and you get the crappier value. So for example, in age 2, if you want these conquistadors, you need to make sure that your infantry person is a swordsman, not just a warrior. Because if like you're using a warrior that's from age A, warrior is an age A card, and age 2 is 2 ages away from age A. So warriors that apply to age 2 tactics are considered obsolete, and they give you a crappier value. But if you manage to use... where the hell are they? Swordsmen! Then you're fine. Because swordsmen are from age 1, that's only 1 age ago, and that's totally cool. Swordsmen, however, do become obsolete in age 3. So any age 3 tactics made using swordsmen, you have to get the lower value. And that does make age 2 military units pretty good, because there are no age 4 cards. So if you have age 2 military units, then any tactics that involve those units are not going to be obsolete. Okay, well, I think that's just about everything technically in the rules, probably minus some things I forgot. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it somewhat, and I hope that you enjoy this game when you get it. Take care, everybody, and happy gaming.